lastly, here we're going to look at when we have to divide with um, imaginary or complex numbers. So first, let's look over here. So the main thing when we're dividing is that we never want to have an I in our denominator like we start with here. So that's when we have to do stuff, right? If there's no I in your denominator, you don't really have to go any further. So in this case, this first example, we do have an I in the denominator, so we've got to do some stuff with it. So basically, we want to be able to cancel out that I. And so the way we do it when there's only one term in the bottom with an I is you multiply by I times I. It's a bad I. The reason you multiply by I in this case is that we want to get to I squared. Because if you get to I squared, then we can cancel out and turn our I squared into, hopefully you recall what I squared is, you can turn your I squared into -1. So if we go ahead and we multiply by I, okay, hopefully you recall whatever you do on the bottom, you've got to do on the top. So if we multiply by I on the bottom, you got to multiply by I on the top. So now multiplying fractions, we go straight across. 7I times I gets us to 7I squared. And on the top, we have to multiply both things by I, 3 times I and 2I times I. So we get 3I plus 2I squared. Okay, now we've got those I squareds. We got to make sure we remember that I squared is equal to -1. So wherever we see an I squared, we plug in a -1. So we got 3I stays there, plus 2 times -1 turns us into a -2. On the bottom, we have a 7, and there's an I squared, so 7 times I squared, or 7 times -1, turns you into a -7. In the last video, we said we always want to make sure we put our real term first, so we want to put this term first. So we got -2 plus 3I divided by -7. That's as far as we need to go. Right, we only need to say, we only need to get to a point where we have no i's in our denominator. So that's one. So let's look at this next example, scrolling down. This next example, we see that our denominator is a 13, and there is no I in our denominator. So for this, we can say, okay, we're done. Fake check, we're done, right? We don't need to get any I out of our denominator. No I in the denominator. Still getting used to writing on this thing. Okay, so those are nice, easy questions when that happens because you're done. All right, let's move up over here. Okay, so if we look back to our first example, all we had was a 7I in the denominator. Now we have more than just one term, right? We've got this 2, and we've got this 3I. So we've got to figure out how to cancel that I out in this case. So what we do is we multiply by something called the complex conjugate. You should have dealt with it a little bit in Algebra 2, but we'll recall it here. So all you're doing is changing the sign in between your two terms and multiplying by that. We'll see in a second, this helps us cancel out any I terms that we have. So on the top, we go just like we did last time, 4 times 2, 4 times -3i. So we get 8 minus 12i. And in the denominator, we've got a FOIL, right? FOIL, FOIL. So however method you like to FOIL, make sure you use that. I like just the first outside, inside, last. So we got 2 times 2 gets us 4, plus 6i, minus 6i. Notice those two will cancel out nicely for us. Minus 9i squared. All right, so as I said, these two cancel out. We got a plus 6i and a minus 6i. Then we want to simplify any bit that we can. Hopefully you recognize that we got this I squared, and we said that's got to be a negative 1. So at this point, let's just bring down our top. We've got 8 minus 12i. Nice that it's already in order. We've got 4, because that's 6i, and negative 6i went away. And we have negative 9 times negative 1 gets us to a positive 9. So again, you're like, okay, must be done. But actually, right, notice you can add together those 4 and the 9. So we get to 8 minus 12i over 13. Beautiful. Notice our denominator has no i's in it. So we can say, bada bing, bada boom, check, we're done. So again, a key point here is that we're multiplying by this complex conjugate up top. And all we did was flip the sign that was initially in here. Right, so it wasn't addition, it was turned into a subtraction. If it was a subtraction, we would just turn it to an addition. So let's move on to one last one. We're not going to do this whole one completely. I'm going to let you work through it. But I just want to make sure we talk about what we should be multiplying by. So in this case, again, we have two pieces in our denominator. We have our 2 and we have our 3i. Oh, well, that's a little less fun. What should we be multiplying by? Got to multiply by the complex conjugate. And notice our denominator is the same as the previous example. So all we got to do is flip it to a 2 minus 3i. 2 minus 3i. Whatever you multiply the top by, you got to multiply the bottom by. Vice versa. And let's just set this up real quick. Notice now we have to FOIL the bottom, but we also have to FOIL the top in this example. So make sure we go through, we FOIL both pieces, and simplify down as much as possible.